It is said that French philosopher Voltaire's last words, when a priest by his bedside asked him to renounce Satan, were, "Now is not the time for making new enemies."
Daddy wasn't fighting a bow wow. Daddy wasn't fighting a bow wow. I love my little cat. I'm very fond of that. I'd rather have a big bow wow 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 wow.
Hello, and welcome to the Mochiverse. I'm Lynette.
And I'm Skip.
And just a disclaimer, those last words from Voltaire may or may not have been true. I didn't do a ton of research. There are a few stories out there about other last words from him, but that one was catchy, so I put it in. That's probably incidentally going to be the theme for today's episode, or the disclaimer for today's episode anyway. So today we're talking about famous last words. Some of these may not be real. They're all from the internet, and they weren't super heavily researched, but, just figured we'd have a little bit of fun, right?
Yes, fun with death.
Yes,
Yeah.
Fun with death.
Yeah.
Fun with death.
Where did that come from?
I don't know. I just was thinking that as I was typing it in my notes. Fun with death.
Okay.
Listen, if you're going to try and find meaning in the things I say, you don't know me very well.
There you go. I just, all of a sudden, sometimes things hit you and you go, okay.
Yeah. Why did she say that? I know what you mean. You mean sometimes it hits you that your daughter's a weirdo?
Yeah, sometimes.
It's like, oh shit. She's making me tell the truth now. I don't want to do that.
Keep going.
All right, folks.
You want to shovel there? Dig yourself deeper? All right.
Yeah, I'm good at it. Listen, I'm proud to be a weirdo, so you can admit it too if you want to. It's fine.
Yeah.
All right, so who are we doing first? I think first we're going to do Joan Crawford. And allegedly Joan Crawford's last words were, "Damn it, don't you dare ask God to help me." It's my best Joan Crawford. Apparently her housekeeper was praying at her bedside, and she was very, yeah, that sounds like Joan Crawford would say, although I don't know Joan Crawford as well as I know the portrayal of Joan Crawford in Mommy Dearest.
Right.
That's mostly what I know of Joan Crawford. I have read a lot about her because I recently learned, her daughter Christina's book that sparked the movie and everything like that. I learned that it possibly could have either been exaggerated or completely made up. I don't know, because I read a lot of other things about her, like her personality, to say that a lot of it might have been true. Maybe possibly not the wire hangers thing, or maybe the wire hangers thing, because apparently she was super particular about really weird details of the way she ran her household, the way she did all of her, her clothes and her face and her, that whole thing in Mommy Dearest where she's plunging her face in ice water. She used to do that. All of that was real stuff. And I think a lot of the quotes online, sort of the backlash from that book, a lot of people are like, no, she was never like that. You're horrible. Ms. Crawford was nothing but sweet and nice and lovely to all of us. I feel like part of that is that's how you spoke about the dead in that generation, first of all.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also, that is how people would speak about a beloved celebrity when they're dead. You didn't diss somebody after they were dead back then. And certainly not if they paid your wages, Yeah,
I guess that's true. I think that, I'm not sure if you could say it's etiquette, but was it speak ill, don't speak ill of the dead. But, you think about that at times, and when you see someone do something at somebody's funeral and they're telling stories or whatever, you very seldom, if they say they're cranky, but they may word it a different way. They may say they're particular.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. You just sort of, they were such an interesting person. Like the way, you know who I'm talking about. I have a particular relative that whenever anybody asks what she was like, they use lots of different words that aren't the real words about that particular person.
Yeah, I think, That's true. I remember, and that may have been part of the generation, and to some extent, we all pick up the same things. Because I remember I was doing a family tree with my aunt, and there was a picture of my mother, and I didn't want to take that opportunity. I said, "Gee, what was my mother like when she was young?" And my Aunt Franny said, "Oh, no, she was very nice." I'm going, okay, that didn't really tell me anything, because I know as kids, we were kids, we were mischievous, or what were we?
Right.
Did we smile all the time? I mean, something like that would have been okay. But I think that previous generation, again, is just to extent our generation, particularly me, I may not say something like that. I would find a way to word it, she was a pleasant kid, but she was like every other kid,
Yeah. Oh, there's definitely a lot of sugarcoating that went around, and you know what? Your mother probably was very nice, but like,
I wouldn't
she was a very nice person, but also like, she had a lot of personality. Like she was funny and, she was interesting. So it's like, come on, Franny. Give us some more.
Exactly. And hey, listen, I also knew, as they say, you get the Irish up, that have the temper. So
Absolutely.
I knew she had a temper like any one of us do. So that kind of thing is interesting, which is probably appropriate when you see these things, that they wouldn't speak ill of a person. It was interesting as we're talking about it. I can't do voices, but if I could do voices, it would have been interesting to be able to do a voice of Joan Crawford.
Yeah, I was just sort of channeling like the 30s and 40s kind of movie star voice, but that's more like what's her name there? Why do I always forget her name? On Golden Pond. She had a very distinctive voice, but
well, she definitely had a distinctive voice.
That was that Connecticut kind of "Where do you summer?" kind of
darling
kind of voice. Yes, darling. But Joan Crawford kind of did talk like that too, because that was that Hollywood accent that they sort of used. That was sort of like, and it was on purpose. I read somewhere that the Hollywood accent was supposed to sound as British as possible while still being American. It was that sort of affected sort of way of speaking,
Yeah, I think you're right. That was the way it was then, as opposed to the way they will do it now, where in movies, I think we all see it, is that some of them would speak their accent, or like Sean Connery. Connery always had his Scottish accent, no matter what.
He's just like, screw you guys, I'm not doing accents.
Yeah, he's from a New York, he's a Chicago cop, and he still had his Scottish accent. And that's probably not the best example of it, but there were other movies he was in where he never changed his accent.
Yeah, in Highlander, he was like a Spanish lord or something.
Right.
Or
so
like,
he still had the Scottish.
Yeah, he has Scottish accent. And the person who played the Highlander was supposed to be Scottish, and he was French, so whatever.
Yeah.
He kept his French accent.
Yeah.
Yeah, the next one is Winston Churchill. Do you want to do a Winston Churchill accent and say his last words?
Good luck. Not very posh.
Yeah, no, just channel that. We shall fight them on the whatevers.
We will fight them from shore to shore. And by the way, being from Massachusetts, one of the things, a little bit of trivia, if you listen and you listen carefully to Massachusetts and how people talk, and then you listen to someone from Britain or Australia, you pick up the same thing. They drop their R's, they drop the H's. That's where it comes from.
Absolutely.
Anyway.
I know when I was trying to do Winston Churchill, I ended up doing a Kennedy instead. It's more like is one of the Kennedys doing the Winston Churchill thing. We shall fight them on the rivers and do this and the other thing because it is hard.
Yeah.
Wait, wrong speech.
Yeah. So Winston Churchill, I think everybody knows of him. His last words is, "I am bored with it all." I think not everybody, most people know he was a Prime Minister of England from 40 to 45, and then again from 51 to 55. He was a pretty interesting character.
He was.
Yeah. You've seen it in films. He was moody and spoke very frankly, didn't censor himself all that much. I think we were just talking earlier about The Crown. I don't know if it was historically accurate where he controlled what was said when the king was diagnosed with cancer and an authority had the authority as a prime minister, he may have had the authority to hold that information back, which seems pretty contrary to what we all know nowadays. The idea that someone would keep something back from us, regardless of our station.
Yeah, that's true. Although the constitutional monarchy thing has a lot to it, but one of the parts of it is like the monarchy part and the parliament part. The idea is to keep each other in check in a certain way, and the monarchy is informed of all of the dealings of parliament. But it ends up, and like how true it is or not, it is interesting when you watch The Crown and you see those scenes where they're talking about parliament discussing things with the monarchy. There was quite a bit of power that belongs to parliament in the decisions that the monarchy makes about their family.
Right.
Because that is very important to the structure of the constitutional monarchy. So in other words, like when King Edward succeeded, that was a huge matter for Parliament and the monarchy to grapple with together. And so in later times, when somebody wanted to get married to someone else, it kind of had to be approved by Parliament, because it had to be like, well, it can't be this person and it can't be that person, because this is very serious. It almost destroyed everything, very dramatic. But yeah, Parliament got to say what got released and what got said. Yeah. And I'm sure they still do, but they kind of have a mutual understanding in current times. Whereas I think the TV show The Crown obviously dramatizes it. But I think during those times right after World War II in particular, it was all considered very serious, and they wanted to be very careful about information, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm. To go on is like, I think apparently he held meetings with his secretary while taking a bath. Actually, I think you and I talked about this before. Sounds a little bit like LBJ conducting cabinet meetings while he sat on the toilet.
Yeah.
And that was his favorite thing, LBJ.
Well, I think he did that because he didn't want to waste any time, correct? Because he...
Yes.
Yeah. But he was also kind of a dirty ass, too. He was always he was always talking about his, Johnson.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Which, by the way, I researched today. It does not come from LBJ, that term, Johnson. It was before him. But, it sure does seem like it came from him, because that's all he talked about.
Yeah.
So I got a little bit into the research just because that's what I do. And Winston Churchill's father was an interesting person, too. He comes from a long line, which, by the way, his family line includes Princess Diana, because of this, whatever her name was, Spencer. It includes the Spencers. So he was related to her. But his father, Lord Randolph Churchill, I guess he was known as a rowdy sort in his youth. He was accused of such things as drunkenness, smoking in academic dress, which is like, oh, you're wearing your school uniform and you're smoking.
Oh, yeah.
And smashing windows at the Randolph Hotel. And he earned a reputation as an enfant terrible, which is like, bad child, basically. And he later married an American.
Oh, my God.
Oh, my God. What are all these British people doing wearing Americans? Wait, never mind. I did that once. But yeah, so that was Winston Churchill. I think it's very fitting that his last words were that he was bored with it all, because he was a very emotional person, apparently. There was some talk, which you never know if it's true, that he was quite depressive. I mean, he drank a lot, certainly, smoked a lot of cigars, but apparently he was quite depressed a lot. And he had a lot of bad things happen in his life, so I understand.
Right.
But yeah, I can sort of understand. And he lived to be quite old, and he was never really in the best of health. So I can understand just wanting to be done with it at that time, probably. Yeah, so next is Frida Kahlo. Did you know who Frida Kahlo was?
I was just going to say, I never heard that name before.
If you do a quick Google image search, just look up a picture of her, you'll know exactly who she is.
Okay. She
was a Mexican artist. I think we're talking about the early to mid 20th century. She's the one with the eyebrows there. She had the unibrow. She was the artist. Have you ever seen those pictures? She was a very good artist. She had a rough life. She had polio when she was a young child. And then she recovered from that. But when she was 18, she was in this horrific, horrific bus accident. And some people died in the accident, but I was reading about her injuries. Like she had some sort of metal pipe just go through her in different spots, like of her abdomen. It like pierced her uterus and everything. And she was bedridden for 3 months and she was wearing like a full body plaster cast. She couldn't do anything for 3 months. And that's when she turned to art and she started creating art. And she had a lot of influences. Mostly she was influenced by like Mexican folk art, but like also the Renaissance and other artists. She has a very distinct style in her art. She's very raw and emotional. Like the paintings you'll see that a lot of them are of her as the subject. She's sort of showcasing like herself in the world, kind of displaying an emotion through her art with herself as the subject. I'm not a huge art scholar, but you definitely feel things when you look at her artworks. Very, very evocative, very emotional, very strong. She had a really terrible time in her marriage. Her husband didn't look like a good match anyways. Like her mother, opposed the match, but he also like cheated on her constantly. She had a miscarriage. She didn't want to have the kid anyways because she had all of her health problems, and he made her sort of keep the pregnancy. She ended up miscarrying and almost dying from that. She had just tons of problems with her marriage and him. She was very depressed a lot. She attempted suicide several times, and then her death, like she died in the hospital. And they said on like her death certificate that her cause of death was a pulmonary embolism, but they had never done an autopsy. And one of the nurses had said that she had overdosed on one of her medications. So that's sort of the general consensus is that she overdosed.
So in her last words, her famous last words, joyfully awaiting the exit, and I hope never to return.
Yeah. That's rough.
Pretty
That's definitely rough. Did you end up looking at a picture of her?
I was just looking at some of the art. Yeah, it was kind of provocative in some ways.
It is. Yeah. She was a very strong artist, and she's a lot of it has to do with feminism as well, and the role of women in any society, of course, but like definitely hers at the time that she was alive. She went through a lot of pain for a lot of reasons, but some of those reasons were being a woman with no power in the time she was living, So that was part of it too. And I'm not an expert on feminism either, because I'm a woman, but that doesn't mean anything as far as having knowledge goes, about feminism. But I can understand where she's coming from, and you do sympathize with her when you see all of the pain she must have gone through in her life, and turning it into art. I can respect that. So yeah, Frida Kahlo.
Next up, Leonard Nimoy.
My boy.
Yeah, favorite character. Played Spock in Star Trek.
Yep.
And that's not the only thing he ever did, but
no,
that was he was most recognized for.
Plus, he's from Boston.
Yeah, he's from Boston.
He's from Boston, which also makes him good. Anybody from Boston. Except for that one guy you and I talked about, that one actor. When I told you he creeped me out and I didn't like his face, you're like, he's from Massachusetts. And I'm like, still though. Usually it turns me around. Usually I'd be like, I love that guy. And then I'll Google him. I'll say, see, Richard, he's from Massachusetts. But not that other guy. I forget his name. But that other guy just has an angry, creepy face. I don't like him. But Leonard Nimoy, he's my boy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. He had 2 children, 6 grandchildren, and 1 great-grandchild. Before, and we didn't get at this the last time, but before passing away, he had his final thoughts for the world at large. Life is like a garden. Perfect moments can be had, but not preserved except in memory. That's what he tweeted. So.
Yep. And then after that, he also wrote LLAP. And you know what that means, right?
LLAP? No, I don't know what that is. What does that tell me?
Live long and prosper.
I should have known that.
Yeah. Yeah. So those were his last words, in my opinion.
I knew what it was, but I was just letting you say it. So.
Oh, okay. Okay, Dad. The bullshit comes at the end of the episode. How many times do I have to tell you?
Yeah.
No, Leonard Nimoy was absolutely the greatest. I mean, he was in my favorite episode of Columbo where he played a villain. I loved him as a villain because he's not. I guess he was a super sweet guy in real life. He was always smiling and always laughing, which is very funny because he played Spock in
Yep.
Star Trek. So kind, and he regretted not being able to spend a lot of time with his kids during like Star Trek. So when he was done with that, he spent a lot of time with them and he tried to make up for lost time and with the grandkids and everything, became really devoted to his family. He was an excellent director. He did lots of pictures. He was an artist, he was a photographer. I don't know if you ever saw his photography. He
No,
did a
I-
lot of plus size nudes. That was like his subject of choice. And they're very beautiful. Not everybody likes that sort of thing, but I do. He did a lot of comedies. He directed a lot of comedies. He did Three Men and a Baby famously.
Mhm.
He directed some of the Star Trek movies. I mean, some of the better ones, in my opinion. I don't know, he was just a really cool guy. He had a lot of hand in his character of Spock as well, which I learned
Yeah.
watching a lot of documentaries. The Live Long and Prosper was his idea.
Mhm.
And also the hand thing, with the fingers, that was his idea because it came from synagogue. I guess
Oh yeah.
there's
Yeah.
there was some sort of significance there that he saw in his synagogue. It's a greeting, and the live long and prosper is derived from a Hebrew greeting as well. So
Mhm.
I don't know. I just thought that was cool that, acting can go a couple of different ways, right? I've known of actors who are like paycheck actors. They go there for the paycheck. They don't really, you try to interview them and you could tell they're not really interested in talking about their characters and stuff because they're like, yeah, it was a great project. I had a good time working on it. But then I kind of really like the ones who are interested in their character and almost think about themselves as their character.
Mhm.
I don't know if that's off-putting to other people, but I kind of really like that because it really adds to it. And especially when you're talking about somebody like from Star Trek, there's a lot of people who care an awful lot about Star Trek and care about the characters and care about the stories, sometimes to a fault. And I will count myself in that boat. But it's really impressive when the actors sort of embrace that and respect it and also kind of go along with it. This is why I like David Tennant so much because David Tennant loves Doctor Who,
Right.
and that's appealing, as opposed to like, I mean, I don't have any problem with Christopher Eccleston. Shout out to Christopher Eccleston, but he saw that as a job and he's just like, yeah, Doctor Who, I did that once.
Yeah.
Whatever. But anyhow, Leonard Nimoy, we love him.
Yeah.
Who's next?
Oscar Wilde.
Yes. Did you ever read any of his plays or his stories?
No, I didn't.
You may have heard of The Importance of Being Earnest.
Mhm.
That was a play that he wrote. Or The Picture of Dorian
Dorian
Gray.
Gray. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one where he's young and beautiful and he wants to stay young and beautiful forever. So he commissions a painting and the painting ages instead of him.
Hmm.
It's like a sort of fantasy sci-fi ghosty kind of story.
Yeah, he had a pretty controversial life, right?
He did, yeah. I mean, he was Irish. That's why he was controversial. Sorry, I didn't mean to say it that way. He was controversial. I mean, he was Irish after all. No, that's not it. He was gay in a time that it was illegal to be gay. So he was closeted, but it was an open secret. Everybody knew. And yes, and in addition to that, he also preferred the company of younger men, which was also pretty controversial. And it was like everybody knew this, it was an open secret, but his sort of downfall came when he had an affair with a younger man. And this younger man happened to be an aristocrat and of an important family. As a matter of fact, his father was I just feel so silly saying these titles, but his father was the Marquess of Queensberry, and he is the very person who invented the Queensberry rules of boxing. Yeah, which makes him very important. And he was what you would think of as a Marquess of Queensberry in the 1800s. He wasn't super into the idea of his son having an affair with a dude, I guess. I don't know a lot about the relationship, but I did remember reading that when everything was all discovered and it all went down and the father knew about it, that this young man didn't exactly defend Oscar Wilde. I think he ended up doing what his father wanted and went away and said, yeah, he's a pervert, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that's pretty shitty. Check me on that if that's not true, but I think that was what I read. But yeah, Oscar Wilde, he was tried and eventually he was convicted. Gross indecency, and the charges included young men, which we're talking about adult men, just to be clear, but these were, sort of young adult men that he preferred. And he spent 2 years, he served 2 years hard labor, which back in the late 1800s, that involved running for hours and hours on a treadmill, breaking up rocks, and picking oakum. Have you heard about that before
No.
this? So this was something in England that they did in the workhouses, and workhouses were terrible, terrible places where you would go if you had no other choice. Like you couldn't afford, it was either that or debtor's prison. You were homeless, you had no options for employment, and you were destitute. They took you in and they fed you, but you had to work for it. And the conditions devolved very quickly. Like I'm sure when these places were first established, they weren't as bad as they were, just like anything else.
Mhm.
But the conditions were so bad. I mean, you separate parents from children, you separate husbands and wives, and they would all be put to work doing either really hard, laborious tasks like, breaking up rocks with pickaxes, or mostly the women had to break up oakum. And what oakum was, it was basically old rope from ships
Mhm.
that, the ropes had broken and there's just pieces of rope and they just put them in a big pile. And your job was to take your hands and just separate all the fibers off of this rope. And this is like ship rope. This is like the really heavy duty stuff.
Right.
And so your fingers would just be bleeding and sore and raw, but you'd have to do it for hours and hours and hours every day. And you just pick apart all these fibers and you put them in a pile and they would basically reweave them into new rope, just recycle it. But yeah, so Oscar Wilde had to do that for a couple of years. It broke him. I mean, he went into exile after that. I believe he still did writing, but let's see. So he died in 1900. So at the end of the year, November 30th, 1900, he died from meningitis. And it was meningitis, but of course, a lot of people in the press wanted to be funny about it and say that it was from syphilis.
Right.
Because, of course, because he's, this horrible person who's indecent. Anyway.
And his last words were?
His last words were, "My wallpaper and I are fighting a duel to the death. One or other of us has got to go." And that's actually very Oscar Wilde because he was funny. He was very funny. I mean, he's pretty much, if you've ever seen a picture of him, he looks like Stephen Fry because Stephen Fry played him in a movie once. It's like the perfect casting. He looks just like Stephen Fry and he was just as witty and, probably bitchy. and kind of, he was very clever and he always came up with a very clever thing to say. And there's just so many interesting stories about Oscar Wilde from lots of people because he knew so many people. And I imagine he was a great person to be around with. I imagine he had some really hard times and he had some really hard emotions and things were difficult for him. But I also think he was probably a really interesting person to hang out with. It's pretty sad, but I do like his last words.
Okay. Yeah, that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
What's the next one? Beethoven?
Beethoven. We know who Beethoven is.
Yeah.
He's that dog
Yeah.
from that movie, right?
Yes, he's the dog, the big dog. Yeah. Beethoven's last recorded words were pity, pity, too late. As the dying composer was told of a gift of 12 bottles of wine from his publisher. Really, his publisher was Schlott Music. I don't know, it's kind of funny and cute.
Yeah, well, they said to him, like, the wine is here. And he's like, well, it's too late now. I'm about to die, guys.
That's right, yeah. Yeah, he died, March 1827?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it said right before he died, there was an almost flash of lightning and a thunderclap, to which he opened his eyes, lifted his right hand, clenched his fist, looking up for several seconds, and then just died. Pretty fittingly dramatic. I think it is dramatic. It's interesting.
It is, and his music was quite dramatic. We all know some of Beethoven's music. I didn't look too much into his life because most people know who Beethoven was. Of course, he was a composer. He was influenced by composers before him, including Mozart. But he had a very passionate way of writing music. His music was very like emotional and passionate. He was the deaf one, correct?
Yes.
And I didn't see much detail about his deafness. I was gonna look into that, but that was a lot of biography on Beethoven, so
Yeah.
I didn't look too much into it. There's a lot of stuff about, love's lost and emotional things, but they did an autopsy after he died, and there was something going on with his auditory canal that they noted in the autopsy.
Right.
But yeah, I don't think they said what his cause of death was because they may not have known exactly. I think it was dropsy. Was he the one who died? I think he died of
Well,
dropsy.
his cirrhosis of the liver.
They did say his liver was, yeah, but I think it said earlier when I was looking, he was ill for quite some time and he was having a lot of fluid in his abdomen, which was known as dropsy, edema, basically.
Hmm.
Could have been a lot of things. Now, Mozart's death, that was something people are still speculating about, but I didn't look up his last words. But I did see the movie Amadeus. So Salieri did it.
According to records, by the time he was 40, he was totally deaf and unable to converse unless he passed written notes back and forth.
Wow.
It's amazing.
It is amazing, actually.
Yeah.
I never watched that film either. The one, what was it called? Immortal Beloved.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't been very cultured lately. I need to get some culture again. I need to stop watching Bridgerton. That's not history. It's like fake history. So speaking of history and culture, Marie Antoinette.
Marie Antoinette.
Yes, what do you know about Marie Antoinette?
Well, she was the last queen of France before the French Revolution, guillotined in 1793.
Yes.
And her last words, and I can't speak French, translated with "Pardon, sir, I did not do that on purpose," because she accidentally stepped on her executioner's shoe.
Yes, and it's listed as, let's see, I can attempt it. Pardonnez-moi, monsieur, je ne l'ai pas fait exprès. That's probably wrong. But yeah, she stepped on his foot. That's so sad. That's her last name. She's like, sorry, dude. Oops, my bad. Sorry.
Yeah.
She was actually a much better person than she was made out to be. I mean, she was killed during the revolution for revolution reasons, but I'm sure you know of the famous saying that she didn't actually say that she was known for.
Let him eat cake. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
let them eat cake. And like the backstory of that was supposed to be that she was informed that the people are starving and they can't even eat bread. And she says, well, then let them eat cake, which either says that she's ignorant and doesn't know anything about how people obtain food and says, well, if they can't have bread, they can just have cake instead, which by the way, it was brioche, not cake. That, or she doesn't give a shit about poor people. The problem with that is that it was written, this let them eat cake. It was written when she was 9 years old. She never said it.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And she was actually very good to the poor people, like for a royal. She had a lot of charitable programs. She was always sympathetic to the poor. She was always giving to the poor as much as you could for a rich, wealthy, like royal person. And there's a story about her wedding. I guess there was a fireworks display at her wedding, and there was, I don't know, an explosion and a fire. There was like a stampede, and a lot of people got killed in the stampede. And she felt really, really bad about that. So she and her husband gave their sort of spending money to those people for the next year in solidarity. So, and Barkley has something to say about that, I think.
Yeah, he's barking about. I don't know what he's barking at. Who knows what he's barking at?
That's okay.
Lately, it's been the geckos. That's beside the point. That could be what he's barking at, or one of his favorite dogs could be walking by.
It
You
could
know.
be. Or maybe he just has an interest in French history.
Could be. you know. So
You never know. I mean, did you ever ask him? No.
no, he'd look at me like, seriously, where's my peanut butter or whatever he want.
Oh my gosh. You said it out loud. Well, he can't hear you. He's in the other
No, he can't hear me.
room.
If he did, that would be like he'd be running, looking at me. Really, really, really.
That's so funny. Yeah. So I don't think she was such a bad person after all. And she never said, let them eat cake. So there.
No. Nostradamus, the renowned prognosticator. What?
Prognosticator.
Cicada. Again, am I going to say this one? Okay, I'm
Yeah.
going to say it.
You could say it.
My tongue got in the way of my eye tooth, and I couldn't see what I was saying.
And you got your merds wixed.
Well, that too. Yes. And his final prediction: tomorrow
Yes.
at sunrise, I shall no longer be here. Well, he was right. He died that night.
I mean, that's kind of an easy one, dude. Like, can you say anything more?
Yeah. Well, you could say that. That's like, it's going to be sunny with clouds and rain.
Yes. Midnight on the ocean, not a streetcar was in sight. The sun was shining brightly, for it rained all day that night. We didn't go over,
What's that?
speaking of predictions about death. We didn't talk about, what is it, Thomas Jefferson, and apparently John Adams, his last words were like, Jefferson still lives, and he was wrong. So John Adams, his last words were, Thomas Jefferson survives. But Jefferson had died at Monticello a few hours earlier. And they were kind of frenemies. They were like best friends, and then they became like estranged from each other later in life.
Didn't they die on the same day, July 4th?
Yeah, well, yeah, they did. But Jefferson died first, a few hours before, and Adams thought he was still alive, and he was like, he beat me, that son of a bitch.
Yeah.
Which, if you watch the John Adams movie, that's kind of the attitude. We never researched that one, but that's in there.
Yeah. Nostradamus, I mean, there were a lot of things that they claim he predicted. And I think it's like a lot of things, there's interpretations.
Mhm.
There's an argument that one of the reasons the Cold War ended was because the Russians read that the world would end with an old man as president. And at the time, Ronald Reagan was president. And it is thought by some folks that it just scared the Russians into breaking up Russia. Now, whether that's true or not is.
That's an interesting theory and also relevant today. But you know what? It's not that much of a stretch. I guess it's not much of a stretch when the US didn't exist yet. But
Yeah.
again, it's not that much of a stretch to think that an old man would be the leader of something. I mean, that's the way it kind of happened a lot in a lot of
Mhm.
countries throughout history. I
Yeah.
mean, like, because kings would live until they died, and some of them got old. Emperors got old sometimes. So, and I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. I've heard that theory expounded, and whether it's true or not, I have no way of knowing. But it's an interesting theory.
It is. I've read a lot of, you can go into, if you want to go into a 7-day rabbit hole about how he predicted 9/11 and Kennedy's assassination and all that stuff. I've been there. I don't know if you've actually read any of his writing.
No.
It's all very vaguely written, and it's obviously written a very long time ago. And our brains are designed to see patterns. And also, I don't know if anybody ever heard this, but history repeats itself.
Mm.
And so when you're speaking vaguely about a person who does a thing, or like a structure that collapses or something, chances are it's happened before. It's possible that he was just a very creative storyteller.
Yeah, that's entirely possible. And I think your point about patterns and the vagaries of how things were written is relevant, because you can, by doing an analysis, what I call analysis paralysis, you can go over any number of things and interpret it a certain way. It's entirely possible that his writings were, like you said, a story, maybe, and people just interpret, oh my God, hey, this happened, and
it sounds just like that. And they do reach. I mean, I don't know if you ever watched any of those documentaries from like the 80s and 90s about Nostradamus stuff. It's all very reachy. They just
Yeah.
really want it to be true. And I get it. My TV shows me lots of things like that in the middle of the night, and it's like, yeah, that makes total sense. The dinosaurs did build the pyramids. Like
Yeah.
whatever else, aliens did this, dinosaurs did that. I don't know. And also, if somebody predicted things that happened, so what? I I don't
Yeah.
want to sound bad, but how does this help us? Like, it's interesting. If it's true that he had visions and he got these sort of pictures of what would happen in the future. I
Yeah.
mean, that's interesting, but it's not very helpful. It's cool, I guess, if it's true. I mean, it's like the thing that we always say about killing celebrities. Like, so let me just be clear for the folks at home. I have this phenomenon that I quote unquote kill celebrities. And there's a very real theory about time that's involved with this. So basically, it's this. My ex and I, we would just all of a sudden just get this urge to watch a particular movie we hadn't seen in a really long time. And the first example of it that I can remember was out of nowhere in the middle of his workday, bought all the seasons of the TV show Kung Fu. None of us talked about that show. None of us mentioned that show. He just was sitting at work one day and he says, I'm just going to buy all of the DVD set of Kung Fu and get it to my house and then start watching it. So he did that, and we got the shipment from Amazon or whatever. We started watching the first episode. We were like, wow, this is an interesting show. It's amazing. I haven't seen it in years. Used to watch it on Nick at Night. Went to bed. Next day on the news, David Carradine died. So it became a little bit of and things like that happened all the time. And so it became a little bit of a joke, like how we killed David Carradine. But we did research, and there's a lot of maybe theoretical physicists or whatever your scientific affiliation is with time. There is a theory that if you imagine time as a pond or a pool of water, and if you take a pool of water and you drop a stone into it, the ripples go in a circular motion to the outside of the pond, but then they reach the outside of the pond and then they bounce back. You've seen those ripples. When those ripples bounce back, they're smaller, and they're sort of like just a little echo of those ripples, but they do kind of come back to the center point where the stone fell into the pond. So if you think of time as a body of water like that, and you think of an event in time that's significant to you as a person, as a stone falling in that pond, and it happened at a fixed point in time, in the future, the ripples that bounced off of that onto the edge of whatever and bounced back, you see like this little sort of image in your head or just a thought in your mind of David Carradine, right? And you go buy Kung Fu and watch it, and then David Carradine dies. He already died in the future when the stone fell into the pond. You just got that little echo ripple, and you just thought David Carradine for some reason. Now, that doesn't make me a psychic. It doesn't make anybody a psychic, but it's an interesting theory about being sensitive to the effects of time and if time's not linear. So I know it's weird, it's out there, but I actually half subscribe to that theory. And I killed Robin Williams. I'm very sorry. I also killed Shelley Duvall. I'm very sorry about that. I did not kill Richard Simmons. I didn't kill Dr. Ruth. And we killed David Carradine a long time ago. So that's my theory about killing celebrities and predictions. But that all comes back to Nostradamus actually being able to predict things and whether that could possibly be true. And there's part of me that thinks it's possible that he could have had like little visions or whatever. But number one, who cares? Because it doesn't really help you live your life or whatever. Maybe it does. Maybe it'll help you. Who cares is a very harsh thing to say. But number two, maybe he did. And isn't that interesting? But let's not, I don't know. Maybe you could make a documentary and make a lot of money on it. I guess that's the only thing. Or maybe you could make a podcast and bore your family and friends to death with it.
Like a pencil story. Anyway.
Like a pencil story. Yeah.
Or a tweezer story.
Yeah, right?
So here's looking at you, kid.
Yeah. Oh, that was good.
I like that.
I did like that. That was a really good impression. Who was that impression of for the kids back at home? It was Humphrey
Bogey,
Bogart.
Humphrey Bogart. Yeah.
You're like looking at me going, I don't know.
I don't know. But I mean, look at each other. Who, what?
I was just saying I'm looking at you, kid. It was Humphrey Bogart. Yes. I love Humphrey Bogart, which is a weird thing for somebody my age to say, I guess. I don't know. I thought he was great.
No, he was a very good actor.
He was. He was. I admired him. His last words were spoken to his wife, Lauren Bacall, as she left the hospital bedside to pick up their children from school. He said, "Goodbye, kid. Hurry back," which is so cute that he used to call her kid. I just think that's so cute. They had a cute relationship. They really did. Yeah. He was, of course, a legend. I tried watching Casablanca many times and hated it many times until I took a film class. And in that film class, they made us watch Casablanca. We were discussing it. And I always used to watch Casablanca as a love story. And truth be told, it's a really terrible love story. It's not a good love story. You don't care about either one of the characters loving each other at all. And it's just not very effective as a love story. But if you look at it as a wartime spy drama, political drama, it makes a lot more sense because a lot of the writing is much stronger in that area. And it actually became a good movie after I watched it from that perspective. So I was kind of glad about that. But my favorite line from Humphrey Bogart is from The Maltese Falcon, which I don't even remember. I don't even remember the whole plot of it, but I will watch it again soon. Yeah. But Peter Lorre is in it. And I freaking love Peter Lorre.
Yeah, he was a sniveling weasel.
He was. And he was being a sniveling weasel in this scene and doing something or other. And Bogart was just beating the shit out of him. And he said, "When you're slapped, you'll take it and like it." That was so good. It's perfect. It's the perfect line from Humphrey Bogart in anything. And you could fight me on that because I'll win. Yeah, we love Humphrey Bogart. And I mean, I've watched a lot of his films. He just was good. But when you watch the ones, what is the name of his character that he did like a recurring, like the private detective one?
Sam Spade.
Yeah, Sam Spade. Those, they're good and everything, but I think he got too formulaic in them. He would just be saying like almost punchlines all the time. But I did sort of notice in all those movies, he would just like wake up and smoke a cigarette. Like instantly waking up, smoke a cigarette, drink a slug of some kind of brown liquid.
I liked him in The African Queen more than a lot of movies I saw. I thought that was a very good film for him in terms of acting. You would look at the character, particularly in that film, and you wouldn't be seeing Humphrey Bogart. You'd be seeing the character.
Yeah, I haven't seen that movie in a long time. I'll have to watch it again. And our girl that we were just talking about earlier was in that. And I remember her name now, Katharine Hepburn. Yes, the on Golden Pond lady.
Yep.
The Connecticut accent.
Yep.
No, she was wonderful though. And I love On Golden Pond. And everybody of every generation should watch that movie because it's very, very good. Yeah. I watched it a few weeks ago. It holds up. It's still funny and cute. And very it's heart-wrenching, that movie. You have to be in a certain mood to watch it, but
yeah, you do. Yeah.
It's very good. But we used to watch that together as a family, and we used to make fun of Katharine Hepburn. You old poo. Yeah, no, I would have to watch The African Queen again because I know that it's good film.
Yes.
But I feel like I've only caught bits and pieces of it recently, so I'll have to sit down and watch it again. Next is Charlie Chaplin. We love Charlie Chaplin. The beginning of his life was a little bit rough. We were talking about workhouses before, and unfortunately, Charlie Chaplin lived in a workhouse for quite some time. His parents were both music hall performers, and this is like the late 1800s. His parents had separated, and his mother just really had a hard time making ends meet with the kids. And so she went and took them all to a workhouse. And this was, again, last resort stuff. You didn't do this unless you had no other options. And, separated from his mother, and he was put into the work. Now, when they were little kids, they did make them work, but not as much as the adults. Mostly they just kind of neglected the kids, just barely fed them. One thing that they did do was they made the older kids take care of the younger kids. And Charlie Chaplin in an interview was talking about that. He said in the children's ward, the older children were tasked with bathing the younger ones. And he spoke about the embarrassment of being sponged down by a 14-year-old girl when he was 7. That's a bit rough.
That's a tough one.
Yeah. He was a silent film star.
Yep.
He did do one talkie. He did that one film. But yeah, he did have a fascinating past. I do love reading about him. But yeah, the workhouse thing, that was the part that always struck my mind. And it kind of equates him to Dickens in my mind, because Dickens also lived in a workhouse when he was young.
Right.
It's sort of like the same thing for me. But yeah, so on his deathbed, the priest who was attending him said, "May the Lord have mercy on your soul." And Chaplin quickly replied, "Why not? After all, it belongs to him."
Go.
I imagine he was a funny guy too. I did watch a movie about him, but it was a fictionalized movie about him. What was that? Robert Downey Jr. playing him?
Yep.
I wouldn't take that as a documentary or anything. I'm sure it was a little bit exaggerated. But it wasn't one of the actresses from Game of Thrones his like granddaughter or something?
Well,
Yes, Una Chaplin. She's a Spanish actress, and her mother is Geraldine Chaplin. She's the granddaughter of Charlie Chaplin. She was the one.
Okay.
Did you watch Game of Thrones?
No, I didn't. No.
Oh, okay. For folks who did watch Game of Thrones, and for those who didn't, spoiler alert, she was the pregnant one who was killed during the Red Wedding. She was a really good character. I liked her a lot. And they just killed everybody in that show. Still a good show, though, up until the last season.
Okay. So George Harrison?
Yes. Another one of my boys. How do you feel about the Beatles individually? I don't think I ever asked you that. I know you like the Beatles, but how did you feel about each one? Like, do you have a favorite one?
Yeah, I mean, McCartney.
Yeah.
I thought that one of my favorite songs from George Harrison was, I'm not sure if I get the, well, my song Weeps.
Oh, well, my guitar gently weeps.
That's one of my favorite of his songs,
I think that's from the White Album, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's a great song. But yeah, Paul and George are my favorites because they were the most musically creative, I think. They took a lot of influences from different musical styles, both of them. George did that especially later, but Paul always did that. Like, Paul had such a diverse range of styles from different kinds of music. And he liked to use them. He liked to mix them up, and he liked to put humor in it. And George was the same way. George was so funny. It's really a tie between the two of them for my favorite Beatle, because I know everybody's supposed to say like John Lennon. I don't think people still say that, but it was always like, oh yeah, John Lennon. But I'm not a huge fan of John Lennon.
Yeah, I think, my thing with John Lennon is I always felt like he was, a good songwriter. But in terms of musically, I kind of equate what you did with Harrison and Paul McCartney is that actually a love of music and different musical styles and looking for music. I recently I saw a documentary about Paul Simon, and he pretty much the same way. Paul Simon, in some ways, you'd listen to him and think, he's a bit odd, but it's not how it comes out. He was just like really into all different kinds of musical sounds, and I think that was some of the things that happened with the Beatles. And I guess you could argue about whose ideas it was. They were actually pioneers in some of the ways that they had added sounds to their recordings in ways that back then didn't have the same electronic availability, I guess, to manipulate
the technology
sounds and stuff.
Yeah.
Technology just wasn't there. So they would do it literally with tape,
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that made the Beatles so great was their creativity and their ability to come up with different ways of looking at music
and the bravery of doing that too, because and that's why I really enjoyed like David Bowie, because like if you become a star and then change it up, that's got to be a really brave thing to do, especially with the Beatles. They explode onto the scene. They're huge all around the world, and then they're like, we're gonna start writing some weird stuff now. Is that okay with you guys?
Yeah.
And some people it wasn't okay with, and some people are like, what the hell is this? Where's my love me do or something? I want my head bopping stuff.
Yeah.
And they were like, yeah, we want to like artistically explore stuff. And then we're going to go to India for a little while and learn about spirituality. And well, that was all George, but we're going to do some drugs and we're going to do some weird things. And we're going to like figure stuff out. And people stuck with it and they stuck with it, you know, as long as they could before they all before John broke them up.
Yeah.
And that's documented, by the way, too, because
Right. Yeah.
Paul said it. Somebody asked him, who do you think broke up the Beatles? Oh, no, it was John. Yeah, that's what happened. I mean, it wasn't even a controversy. It was like, he was like, bye, you know.
Yeah. What happens in a lot of musical groups is that someone in that group all of a sudden has had enough for whatever reason at all. And they may not have been as much into the process or whatever you want to call it.
Oh, sure. Especially when it goes in a different direction.
Yeah. And you know, and they maybe over the years, you know, you start out, it's kind of like some people know what they want to do in their lives, but sometimes you fall into something accidentally. And while you're in it, you could probably be thinking, you know, I'd rather be a lawyer, or I'd rather be this, or I'd rather be that. Yeah. And that thought is always with you the whole time. So you get to a point where you say, yeah, I don't want to do this anymore. And what's interesting is you can see the love of music. I mean, to me, it's like it goes with the love of sports, where you have athletes that play for a long, long time, and a lot longer than they probably should. And it's the same way with the musician. I mean, think about, you know, Paul McCartney.
Still
this
going.
can't be about money. You know,
no,
it absolutely
he still
can't
loves
be.
it.
You know?
Even Ringo, because Ringo's funny because Ringo, he did write some songs and he wrote some fun ones, right?
Yeah.
He's not the same as the other guys. He wrote different kinds of songs, but Ringo's he's still going on stage and still doing his thing because Ringo, so like George, like you were kind of saying, George and Paul stuck with it for the love of music.
Right.
Ringo stuck with it, in my opinion, for the love of playing music. He just likes playing music. He doesn't necessarily, I don't know if he's necessarily super into writing music and the whole process of recording music, but he really likes playing music. He likes playing his drums. He likes singing. He likes just doing that musician thing. And there's nothing wrong with that. And he's like a really happy guy.
Yeah.
And he gets a lot of love, you know. Paul likes being creative still, and he likes to perform. And George, up until his death, he was writing some really interesting stuff and still participating in it. And, you know, John, I think John Lennon would have kept going. I think he would have still done some music, but I think he was more trending towards joining Yoko in the art world more than anything else. He really couldn't, he had some problems, and he really couldn't function without her. He really didn't see himself in his own terms, I think, without her in it. And that was kind of a problem. Maybe he would have gotten over it over time. He wasn't given that opportunity. So I can't really be super unfair to him.
Right.
Yeah, who knows? But anyway, George, I just love George. And George got funny later. You know, he really explored like his silly side, especially in the videos. Like he would write his solo stuff. It wasn't super silly, but when you'd watch his videos later, like in the 80s and 90s, they were really weird, which was kind of cool. But even like that song Fab, that's a great song. Not really silly at all, but when you watch the video, it's like bizarre. He did all kinds of weird like practical effects, special effects, computer effects in it. And I kind of like that though, because he was using a lot of creativity with that. And then that infamous, you know, I got my mind set on you with all the little like the squirrels and stuff, like animatronic squirrels bopping around like they're at a Bugaboo Creek or something. But yeah, so he, you know, he went on his spiritual journey when he was younger, and he kept on with that. He stayed friends with Ravi Shankar, I guess. I guess Ravi Shankar was with him when he died, which is kind of nice. He also brought Monty Python to America, which you and I are very grateful for.
Yep.
He was the one who, you know, brought it to PBS, and he paid for a lot of it. He paid for a large amount of the budget for The Holy Grail, the film. And also, I guess Robert Plant paid some of that money too, which is really funny. It's excited to see Robert Plant. But yeah, so we love George. He died of cancer in 2001. And his final words were, "Everything else can wait, but the search for God cannot wait, and love one another."
Which brings to mind his song, My Sweet Lord.
That's right, which he got in a little bit of trouble for. Do you remember that? So we know the song, My Sweet Lord. He was sued by the group.
Subconscious plagiarism.
Yeah. He was sued by the Chiffons, who did the song He's So Fine, which has almost the same tune. And he did lose he did lose the suit.
He had to pay the earnings from the song.
Oh, okay.
Looks like $1,599,000.
Well, shit. The thing I do remember from that trial, which is really funny, is after the judgment. So they were trying to determine if these were the same song, right?
Yeah.
And that was the whole crux of the judgment. And the judge determined that these were the same song. So George had to pay, right?
Right.
And then he banged his gavel and he's done. And he goes, just on a personal note, I love both songs. And George was like, wait a second. You just said they were the same song.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I love about George is he's just like, wait, that kind of reminds me of like, do you remember the SNL thing? Do you remember the thing where Lorne Michaels gets on and he's doing like this call out and he goes on camera and he's like, I just want to put this out there. And I really want to have you on the show. So here's my offer. Here's a check for $1,000 made out to the Beatles to come on our show. $1,000 to the Beatles. And then like the next, they do a commercial or whatever. And the next scene is him like arguing with George. And George is like, well, I thought, if it was going to be like $1,000. And then Lorne Michaels is like, well, I thought you understood that if it was $1,000 for 4 Beatles, it would only be $250 for just one Beatle. He's like, yeah, that's pretty chintzy. He wanted the full $1,000 because he was the Beatle. And he's like, no, I'm just giving you like $250.
Yeah.
So that's George. I think we've beaten death to death today.
Yes. Yes, we have.
Yes, we have. That's the end of our morbid smorgasbord. That's really hard to say.
Yeah.
We hope you enjoyed this one, especially after I edit it, because I'm sure it'll sound better. And as always, please feel free to go and rate and review us on Apple Podcasts if you can, because if you review us on Apple Podcasts, then we can be visible to other people trying to find podcasts. So then we could have more people listening, and then we could be super famous, and then you can say that super famous people. So do that. Feel free to message us wherever you listen, if you can send a message, or send us an email at mochiverse@gmail.com. That's MOCCIAVERSE@gmail.com. You can send us suggestions for future episodes, tell us what you think, or you can just say hi. And with that, the moment you all, including my sadistic dad, have been waiting for, I guess go ahead.
Okay. Why didn't the skeleton go on the roller coaster?
The what?
The skeleton go on the roller coaster. It didn't have the guts.
Oh, okay.
Okay. What did the cereal bring to the bank?
Oh, what?
Checks.
That's good.
Yeah. How does the moon style his hair?
Oh, how?
He clips it.
Oh, that's clever.
Yeah.
I didn't think of that one.
Why did the birds attack the dog?
How come?
He was a purebred.
Oh. I'm like, what?
Yeah, what?
Okay, that was all right.
Yeah, okay. What did one wall say to the other?
What?
Let's meet at the corner.
Oh, okay.
Okay, why couldn't the bicycle stand up alone?
It's too tired.
There you go.
I know that
That's
one.
right. That's a good one. How do you make 7 even?
Did it?
Take away the S.
Oh, okay.
What's it called when a snowman throws a tantrum?
What?
A meltdown.
Meltdown. Okay.
Yeah. What did the scarecrow win for an award?
What did he win?
He was outstanding in his field.
Oh, yes.
Yes. How do you make a waterbed bouncier?
How?
You fill it with Poland spring water.
Oh, Jesus.
Now that's definitely a roll my eyes on that one.
Yeah, that's a regional joke too. That's
Yeah, it is.
New England.
Yeah. I don't know what the lowest rank is. Every time I ask someone, they say it's private.
That's a really good one.
Yeah.
I really like that one.
Okay, I think that's enough torture for one day.
No, I like that one. That was a good one to end
That was
on.
a good one, yeah.
All right, folks. I guess we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Bye.
Bye. Ciao for now.
Daddy wasn't finding a bow wow. Daddy wasn't finding a bow wow. I've got a little cat. I'm very fond of that.
the second president. But I always forget his name.
Another brain fart.
All right.